Listen to what happens every Valentine's Day across the world. Millions of men spend their entire paycheck on flowers, jewelry, and romantic gestures, believing they're demonstrating love. Meanwhile, the divorce rate climbs higher every year. Friedrich Nietzsche and Carl Jung would recognize this pattern immediately. Men following scripts written by others, performing emotions they've been programmed to feel, chasing an ideal of love that's designed to keep them psychologically dependent. What if the very foundation of modern romance is built on lies? What if every romantic belief that makes you feel incomplete, desperate, or weak serves someone else's agenda rather than your authentic development? Nietzsche called love the most refined form of slavery. Jung discovered that what most people call love is actually projection, using another person as a screen for their own unconscious desires. Both philosophers understood something that modern society desperately wants to hide. The conventional understanding of love isn't about connection or growth. It's about control. Control over your choices, your energy, your potential, and ultimately, your soul. These 12 lies have been embedded so deeply in our culture that questioning them feels like questioning reality itself. But that's exactly what strong men must do. Every Disney movie, every romantic comedy, every love song on the radio repeats these lies until they become your inner voice. Until you start believing that your worth depends on finding someone who completes you. That real men sacrifice everything for love. That being alone means being incomplete. That compromise equals maturity. Jung called this the collective unconscious, shared psychological patterns that shape behavior without conscious awareness. But what happens when these patterns serve others' interests rather than your authentic development? The first lie cuts deepest because it attacks the foundation of your identity. You need someone to complete you. This isn't just wrong, it's psychologically destructive. Jung spent decades studying what he called individuation, the process of becoming whole within yourself. He discovered that every person contains both masculine and feminine energies, rational and emotional aspects, conscious and unconscious elements. The complete man learns to integrate these parts instead of projecting them onto others. But society teaches the opposite. It tells you to remain psychologically half-developed, seeking your missing pieces in another person. Think about what this does to your relationships. When you believe you're incomplete, you enter partnerships from desperation rather than choice. You become dependent on another person's presence, approval, and emotional state for your own stability. You lose the ability to be alone without feeling inadequate. Jung called this projection, seeing in others what you refuse to develop in yourself. The man who believes he needs someone to complete him never learns to access his own emotional intelligence, intuitive wisdom, or nurturing capacity. He remains forever dependent on others to provide what he could have developed within himself. The second lie ensures you never question the first. Real love requires sacrifice. This sounds noble until you examine what sacrifice actually means in modern relationships. Sacrificing your dreams for someone else's comfort. Sacrificing your time for activities that drain rather than energize you. Sacrificing your authentic self to become who someone else needs you to be. Nietzsche understood that this type of sacrifice doesn't create love. It creates resentment. When you consistently give up what matters to you for someone else's happiness, you gradually lose respect for yourself and develop unconscious anger toward the person who accepted your sacrifices. Real strength comes from abundance, not scarcity. The man who has developed himself completely can choose to share his life without needing to sacrifice his essence. He can be generous from fullness rather than giving from emptiness. But the sacrifice narrative keeps men trapped in relationships where they slowly diminish themselves until nothing remains of who they originally were. They call this love, but Jung would call it psychological suicide. The third lie prevents you from recognizing authentic compatibility. Love conquers all. This romantic fantasy has destroyed more relationships than any other belief. It teaches you to ignore fundamental incompatibilities, hoping that feeling strongly about someone will somehow bridge irreconcilable differences in values, goals, or life vision. Nietzsche wrote extensively about the will to power, each person's drive to express their authentic nature and achieve their highest potential. When two people have conflicting wills, love doesn't conquer anything. It creates a battleground where one person's authentic expression requires the other's suppression. The man who believes love conquers all stays in relationships that slowly destroy him. He ignores red flags, dismisses incompatibilities, and convinces himself that his feelings can overcome any obstacle. Meanwhile, his energy gets consumed by constant conflict resolution instead of personal growth. His potential gets buried under the weight of trying to make an impossible situation work. Jung understood that some relationships serve your development while others prevent it. The ability to distinguish between these two types requires psychological maturity that the love conquers all narrative actively discourages. The fourth lie ensures you never develop genuine confidence. Your worth depends on being chosen. This belief turns every interaction into a performance where you're auditioning for someone else's approval. You modify your personality, suppress your opinions, and hide your authentic desires to become more acceptable to potential partners. Nietzsche called this the slave mentality, defining yourself through others' evaluations rather than your own standards. The man who believes his worth depends on being chosen never learns to choose himself. Watch how this plays out in dating. Men spend enormous energy trying to impress women instead of discovering whether those women deserve their time and attention. They focus on being attractive rather than being discerning. They seek validation instead of evaluating compatibility. This reversal of priorities creates relationships based on desperation rather than genuine mutual value. The confident man operates from the opposite framework. He knows his worth exists independently of others' recognition. He chooses partners based on what they bring to his already complete life, rather than what they might provide to fill his perceived inadequacies. The fifth lie prevents authentic intimacy from ever developing. You should have no secrets from your partner. This sounds like transparency until you realize what it actually demands. The complete elimination of individual psychological space. No private thoughts, no personal boundaries, no aspects of yourself that belong to you alone. Jung understood that healthy relationships require what he called psychological differentiation. Two complete individuals choosing to share their lives while maintaining their separate identities. The man who believes he should have no secrets gradually loses his sense of self. Every thought gets filtered through how his partner might react. Every desire gets evaluated based on relationship impact. Every dream gets subjected to partnership approval. He becomes psychologically absorbed into the relationship until he can no longer distinguish between his authentic wants and his adapted behavior. This isn't intimacy, it's psychological fusion. Real intimacy comes from two separate people choosing to be vulnerable, not from two people becoming one confused entity. The sixth lie keeps you trapped in situations that slowly destroy your potential. Relationships require constant work. This belief normalizes dysfunction by suggesting that healthy relationships naturally involve continuous struggle, endless processing, and perpetual effort to maintain basic compatibility. Nietzsche would ask why you would choose to make your most important relationship the most difficult aspect of your life. Strong relationships should enhance your energy, not drain it. They should support your growth, not require you to constantly manage conflict. The man who accepts that relationships require constant work never asks whether he's in the right relationship. He assumes that struggle indicates commitment rather than incompatibility. He invests more effort into forcing something to work instead of finding something that works naturally. Meanwhile, his energy that could be directed toward achievement, creativity, and personal development gets consumed by relationship maintenance. Jung understood that some connections flow naturally while others require force. The ability to recognize this difference determines whether your relationships serve your evolution or prevent it. The seventh lie ensures you never develop economic independence. Money doesn't matter in love. This romantic fantasy ignores the practical reality that financial stress destroys more relationships than any other factor. It teaches men to prioritize romantic feelings over financial compatibility, creating partnerships where economic pressure gradually erodes emotional connection. Nietzsche understood that resource scarcity breeds conflict. When you can't afford the life you want, you start resenting the person who shares your limitations. The economically naive man enters relationships without considering financial compatibility. He assumes love will overcome economic differences, not realizing that money represents much more than numbers. It represents values, priorities, planning ability, and life vision. Two people with fundamentally different relationships to money will eventually conflict over every major decision. The financially conscious man evaluates potential partners based on their economic mindset, understanding that romantic feelings can't bridge fundamental differences in how you approach resources, risk, and responsibility. The eighth lie prevents you from recognizing manipulation. Love means never having to say you're sorry. This creates relationships where accountability disappears under the guise of unconditional acceptance. It teaches you to tolerate behavior that damages your well-being while labeling your objections as unloving. Jung understood that healthy relationships require boundaries, accountability, and mutual respect. Love without standards isn't love. It's enabling. The man who believes love means unconditional acceptance becomes vulnerable to every form of manipulation. He accepts disrespect, tolerates irresponsibility, and justifies harmful behavior because challenging it might threaten the relationship. He confuses enabling with loving, control with caring, and dependency with devotion. Meanwhile, his own standards erode until he no longer recognizes his authentic needs and boundaries. The psychologically mature man understands that love includes accountability. He can care deeply about someone while refusing to accept behavior that damages his well-being or growth. The ninth lie ensures you never develop emotional independence. You can't be happy alone. This belief creates relationship desperation that attracts partners who exploit your emotional neediness. It prevents you from developing the capacity for solitude that Jung considered essential for psychological health. The man who can't be happy alone brings emotional emptiness into every relationship, expecting others to provide what he refuses to cultivate within himself. Solitude isn't loneliness. It's psychological space for self-development. The man who enjoys his own company can choose relationships that enhance his life, rather than fill his emptiness. He brings emotional abundance instead of emotional need. He offers choice instead of desperation. This fundamental shift in energy attracts completely different types of partners. Instead of people who need him to need them, he attracts people who want to share growth with someone who's already growing. The 10th lie prevents authentic communication. If they really loved you, they would understand you without explanation. This creates impossible expectations that doom relationships to failure. It assumes that love provides telepathic abilities rather than requiring clear communication. Nietzsche emphasized the importance of honest expression over romantic fantasy. The man who expects to be understood without explanation never learns to communicate his authentic needs, desires, and boundaries clearly. Relationships fail more often from unexpressed expectations than from fundamental incompatibilities. The emotionally mature man takes responsibility for clear communication, rather than expecting others to guess his needs. He expresses his desires directly instead of hoping they'll be intuited. He creates understanding through explanation, rather than demanding it through assumption. This basic skill transforms relationship dynamics from guesswork to genuine connection based on honest information rather than romantic projection. The 11th lie keeps you focused on feelings instead of character. Love is just a feeling. This reduces the most important human connections to emotional states that fluctuate based on circumstances, moods, and biochemistry. Jung understood that authentic love involves choice, commitment, and character, rather than just emotional reactions. Feelings change constantly. Character patterns remain consistent. The man who chooses partners based on feelings alone often finds himself with people whose character can't support the relationship he wants to build. Sustainable relationships require character compatibility in addition to emotional attraction. Values, integrity, responsibility, emotional maturity. These qualities determine whether someone can be a genuine partner in building a meaningful life together. The feeling-focused man ignores character red flags because the emotional experience feels intense. He mistakes chemistry for compatibility, passion for partnership potential, and attraction for alignment. The character-focused man evaluates potential partners based on their demonstrated ability to handle responsibility, maintain integrity, and support mutual growth over time. The 12th lie completes the psychological trap by making questioning itself seem wrong. If you really loved someone, you wouldn't question the relationship. This prevents the critical thinking that healthy relationships require. It labels honest evaluation as disloyalty and careful consideration as lack of commitment. Nietzsche championed the importance of questioning everything, especially beliefs that society presents as unquestionable. The man who can't question his relationship can't improve it, can't recognize when it's not serving his development, and can't make conscious choices about his future. Regular relationship evaluation isn't betrayal, it's responsibility. The psychologically mature man periodically assesses whether his relationships support his authentic development and align with his values. He asks honest questions about compatibility, growth, and mutual benefit. He distinguishes between temporary challenges that can be overcome and fundamental incompatibilities that can't be resolved. This ongoing evaluation ensures that his relationships serve his evolution rather than preventing it. These 12 lies work together to create what Jung called psychological complexes, unconscious patterns that control behavior without conscious awareness. When you believe you're incomplete without someone, that love requires sacrifice, that feelings matter more than character, you become psychologically dependent on external validation for your identity and worth. You lose the capacity for independent thought, authentic choice, and genuine self-development. But awareness creates freedom. Once you recognize these lies for what they are, psychological control mechanisms designed to keep you weak and dependent, you can begin developing authentic relationship skills. You can learn to be complete within yourself while choosing to share your completeness with others. You can develop the capacity for solitude that makes your presence a gift rather than a need. You can choose partners based on character compatibility rather than emotional intensity. The journey from psychological dependency to authentic strength isn't easy. Society will pressure you to return to comfortable lies. People who benefit from your weakness will resist your growth. Your own conditioning will create internal resistance to new ways of thinking about love and relationships. But Nietzsche understood that all authentic growth requires destroying comfortable illusions to discover uncomfortable truths. Jung discovered that individuation, becoming who you truly are, requires facing the aspects of yourself that you've projected onto others. This means developing your own emotional intelligence instead of expecting others to manage your feelings, cultivating your own nurturing capacity instead of seeking it only from partners, building your own sense of completeness instead of using relationships to fill perceived gaps in your personality. The man who completes this process transforms every aspect of his romantic life. He attracts different types of partners because he brings different energy to interactions. Instead of neediness, he offers choice. Instead of desperation, he provides abundance. Instead of trying to get something from relationships, he focuses on what he can contribute. This fundamental shift in orientation creates relationships based on mutual enhancement rather than mutual dependency. Most men never experience this transformation because they're too invested in maintaining comfortable lies to face uncomfortable truths. They prefer familiar dysfunction to unknown growth. They choose predictable weakness over uncertain strength. But the men who find the courage to question everything they've been taught about love discover something remarkable. Authentic relationships aren't about finding someone to complete you. They're about finding someone worthy of your completeness. You stand at a crossroads that determines everything about your romantic future. Down one path lies the continuation of comfortable lies that keep you psychologically dependent, emotionally immature, and relationally unsuccessful. Down the other path lies the difficult work of developing authentic strength, emotional independence, and character-based relationship skills. The choice you make determines whether you spend your life seeking validation from others or generating value from within yourself. The 12 lies about love have kept men weak for generations because they're embedded in every story, song, and social expectation about romantic relationships. But philosophers like Nietzsche and Jung saw through these illusions to reveal the psychological mechanisms that create dependency instead of growth. Their insights provide a roadmap for developing authentic relationship capabilities based on strength rather than weakness, choice rather than need, and character rather than just feeling. Your understanding of love determines your experience of love. When you believe lies, you create relationships based on illusion, desperation, and dysfunction. When you understand truth, you can build connections based on reality, abundance, and mutual development. The men who find the courage to abandon comfortable lies discover that authentic love isn't about finding someone to save you from yourself. It's about becoming someone worth saving yourself for. The transformation begins with recognizing that everything you thought you knew about love might be wrong. That every romantic belief that makes you feel dependent, incomplete, or desperate serves someone else's interests rather than your authentic development. That the capacity for genuine love comes from psychological wholeness, not psychological neediness. And that the strongest men aren't those who sacrifice everything for love, but those who develop everything within themselves before choosing to share it with someone worthy of their gift. This knowledge changes everything because now you can't unknow it. You can't unsee the difference between authentic connection and psychological dependency. You can't unfeel the power that comes from being complete within yourself while choosing to enhance that completeness through conscious partnership. Write in the comments, "I choose truth over comfort," and join the community of men who value authentic strength over romantic illusion. Your voice matters because every man who speaks this truth gives permission for others to question their own beliefs, examine their own relationships, and consider whether they're building connections based on strength or weakness. Subscribe and turn on notifications because you're part of a movement that's redefining masculinity around psychological development rather than social performance. The insights we explore together challenge every assumption society wants you to accept about success, relationships, and what it means to be genuinely powerful. Tomorrow's content will reveal another uncomfortable truth that successful men discovered, but society doesn't want you to know. Something so transformative that understanding it will completely change how you approach every important decision in your life, and why the men who figured this out early gained advantages that others spend their entire lives trying to achieve.